Hey guys, Wade here. Hey, I just wanted to go over, well, first of all, I wanted to show my mug in one of these videos because it's been a while. Wanted to show the FAA that I've actually been building this airplane. So, I wanted to do a quick video before I actually mount the firewall. So I'm going to be putting on the firewall here tonight. So, before I take the engine mount off, and I wanted to go over the extrusions, the lower extrusions that I just put on. And then I'm also going to cover all the components that I just put in the Hellhole. I wanted to get all the Hellhole as squared away as I possibly could, so I went ahead and mounted a bunch of stuff in the Hellhole, ran some wiring and some components in there, mounted some stuff, and I'll go over that. So without further ado, I'll get into that right now. Okay, I'm going to start out my discussion on this engine mount. If you've been watching the blog, you'll note that I have just recently mounted, I'm going to use this pointer. I just recently mounted these lower extrusions, the one on the left here, and then I don't know if you can see it in the video, but the one on the right over here. So those are 3/16 inch because my firewall is, although it's standard size, my fuselage is actually curved somewhat more because of the width, and that would be increased width of the both the pilot seat bulkhead, which is 1.4 inches wider, and the aft seat for the guy in back, gallon back, which is about 0.8 inches wider. So that makes my fuselage a little bit more rounded and fuselage shaped, or football shaped, excuse me, than a normal Long-EZ fuselage. So that required me to do some machinations here as far as the number of plies that went in the corners of all these different corners for the extrusions for the engine mount. And so this up top is 1/8 inch, but it's 4130 steel. Over here on the upper right, we have 1/8 inch, which is 2024, and then down on each corner here on the lower right and lower left we have 3/16 inch 2024. And then like I said, that kind of varied the number of pads as far as the bid pad underlayment for each one of those extrusions, although keeping in line with the minimum requirement of 7, which I exceeded on all of them for, that the plan requires. So that is the engine mount. It's bolted in place with the standard AN4 bolts and the standard bolt configuration. It's a pretty tight fit sliding in and out of the different extrusions, so I'm pretty happy with that. It's not loose. It doesn't have to pull the different stubs on the engine mount. The stubs I do have, which was kind of an interesting discovery that came out of a discussion that I was having with Dave Barinholtz on his. They're actually 9/16 versus the standard 5/8. I guess they were 9/16 for a while. I'm not really concerned about the strength. I mean, these things are 4130 steel. They're welded up nicely, and I'm sure it'll hold a 320 size motor no problem. One last thing I want to note that I did put in my blog is that because I'm running a higher horsepower engine, between a minimum of 180 horse, probably about 190 horse in that ballpark. The standard 2 degrees that goes from here to here normally is just a tad shallower. Maybe by, it comes out, that 2 degrees actually comes out, according to my buddy Dave. I think he said it actually comes out when he figured it out. It was an actual true 1.1 degree. So again, mine's just a hair shallower than that, which means that the aft side of the engine or the propeller is just slightly down a little bit more than on a standard Long-EZ, just because it's a higher horsepower engine. That 2 degrees was originally set up for of course, an 0235 118 to 125 horsepower engine. Okay, so with that, I'll pause this and then continue on. Okay, so here's the Hellhole. As you can see, I've repositioned the camera. Again, just recently I put in this lower engine mount extrusion on the right, and then you can see the torque sealed hardware of this lower engine mount over here on the left. That allowed me, of course, to then drill the install and drill the holes for the bolt holes for the engine mount. Now, I had a whole plan on how I was going to put the engine mount on and take it off and you know, make sure it was very precise, but then I ended up, once it was on, I realized I could drill it on and had access as far as the drill access that I needed. So I just went ahead and drilled it right in place as far as the bolt holes on the engine mount. Now, inside the Hellhole, I'm going to go through, I'm going to start on the left. Right over here, this hose right here, that is the oil return line hose for the oil heat system. The feed, which is not shown, will come out of the, come through the firewall from the engine sump and then go to this blue fitting right here. It'll go into this, which is the oil pump for the oil heat system. And then that red and blue fitting right there is what feeds the heat exchanger up in front of the, right by the gallon backs, right where their left leg would be in that area, just behind the pilot seat. So this again is the oil return that goes to the, back into the engine. This, since it's right up front, this fitting here, this tubing, and then if you can see, it's hard for me to see with the camera, but let me move this out of the way. Back in here, that red thing back there that tube goes to, that is the fuel flow meter, FT60 red cube, and then the fuel line comes up through here, through this mandated 30 to 40 micron filter by Silverhawk for the fuel injection system. And then this goes into the firewall. It hits a fitting, and then on the outside of the firewall, it would come over into this area for the mechanical fuel pump. Up top here, going each direction, you can see there are wires. Those are for the landing, taxi, and wig-wag lights that I'm going to have one on each wing towards the end of the wing. And then also the nav and strobe lights that are going to be on the very end of the wings. And then these coiled up wires right over in here, the white ones, those are the shielded cables that go up to the switches on the panel for those. It's kind of hard to see, but I do have a bunch of Adels, about 3 or 4 of them that I've put in place for cable management. This box right up here, that is the relay for the SD8 backup alternator. That's a BNC product. This relay, when I flip the switch up front, it actually puts control of the alternator into the hands of the SD8 and its voltage regulator. That's obviously in case something happens to the primary alternator, which I have a 40 amp BNC. So if it goes haywire, the voltage regulator on the primary amp alternator goes haywire, then once I flip that switch up front in the cockpit, it's actually a couple different switches, but it hands over control via the process by flipping the switch that then ensues through this SD8 relay, and it again hands over control to the backup alternator to then provide power to charge the battery. Of course, not nearly as much, 8 to 10 amps. I swapped this relay out right here. It was originally an S704-1, which comes with the BNC products. I had to add another, instead of just a single pull dual throw relay, I needed a double throw, so a dual throw DP/DT because it actually has another signal line through this gray wire that goes up front that it cuts the line for the charging or recharging of the IBBS system that's made by TCW or Technologies. It cuts that recharging line so that when I'm in the backup alternator only mode, that system doesn't try to just arbitrarily recharge itself and then deplete the 8 to 10 amps that I have available. That recharger is, I think, 2.5 to 3 amps, so it would really dig into the available amps I have. So a couple more things. This is the ground stud right here that will go to the BNC forest of tabs that will be situated right over here. The lug will be on the bottom. That will be situated vertically. The lug will be right about in this area. This will go to that forest of tabs lug. I will not have the forest of tabs on the aft side of the firewall, the hot side of the firewall. It'll just be that stud, the bolt that goes through that, the brass bolt, which will then attach to the grounding strap that it comes out to the engine, which of course is how the ground return is the path for the ground return for the starter. This, let me see if I can tilt this down a little bit. This long wire right here, that cable will go all the way from the starter contactor, which I now have in the nose, and it will go straight to the starter through the firewall with no intermediate connection. Okay, couple more things. On the left side, or excuse me, the right side, the stainless steel 3/16" tubing that I ran. It took me a while to bend that into shape, but that runs all the way down the gear leg now. I just have to connect on the bottom end. I have to connect the end of that tube, that 3/16" brake line, over to the 9.25, 9.25" stainless steel 3/16" hose that goes to the actual brake caliper. Same thing over on this side, 3/16" stainless steel line for the brake line. That goes through a 3/16" to 1/8 inch reducer on each side. It's a I can't remember the name of the company, but it's Bilock basically. And then on the back side, which might be hard to see, is a 1/8 inch aluminum line that goes all the way down on each side. There's one on each side that goes down to the nose through the actual foam in the fuselage. You can also see that you can see that loop right there, which is the 1/8 inch line that's looped up and around. I have service loops on each side. I believe that's pretty much it. I noted it earlier, but this is the oil heat pump, oil pump. This is now hard mounted. The brake lines are hard mounted, and of course, like this Adele, I put that in there for the big yellow power cables. And then one other thing I'll show you in just a second. There's actually a hole that goes up just forward of all this stuff, that goes up through the center section spar for all the wiring coming up out of the Hellhole. So that right there is it. That's pretty much everything that's going inside the Hellhole. There will be one other thing that I'll mount later on, but right up in this area right in here on the actual skin of the bottom skin of the aircraft inside the Hellhole will be the laser altimeter for Mark Zeitlin's new AEX system that I installed. That was a modification. So I'll pause this and then show you the inside of the center section spar. Okay, since I'm off the tripod, this won't be as shake-free as before. This is the 6-wire cable. Has 6 individual wires in it that go up to this area right up here which will be somewhat like Wayne Blackler has. It'll be a headrest for the gallon back, and it'll house the GRT EIS 4000 engine management system, the electro air controller for the electronic ignition, quite a few other things. And that's what the 6 wires in here are basically for, the EIS 4000 engine management functions going up to the panel. Inside here you can see I have a fairly decent sized hole. I've reinforced that with 2 plies of bid on each side of the hole, both inside here and on the bottom side of the center section spar and the Hellhole. And then I put a lot of Flockro in there, about 60% Flocks and 40% micro, in a rather large, what is now a cylinder that this hole goes through. So it's pretty secure. I don't have any concerns over the integrity of that hole or the center section spar. Then going back, you can see the wires. Those will be secured also. I'll try to do this somewhat wiggle free. But right inside here, to hold all these wires, will be, I'll mount an Airdog, but that'll come later. I'm not really concerned about that right now. Right now I want to get this firewall in place. I may not have discussed it, at least recently. It's been quite a while, but this tube right here is a phenolic tube, and that's what allows my I don't have any rudder pulleys on my firewall. I'll show you that in just a second since I brought it up. So I'll go over here, and then on this end, again, these will be secured to the sidewall. I'll get up in there, but these are the wires to both the landing, taxi, and wigwag lights, one on each wing, and then also the nav / strobe lights, as you can see right there on that wire label. These are wire laced and they're labeled, so these are pretty much installed. I don't have them yet. I'll be ordering them within the next day or two. I'll be ordering the components for some Deutsch connectors to put on the end here. I was going to use mini Molexes, but I do not like those. I'll just point this out since I'm in this area. I added this hard point right here, which will be an Airdog clamp. That will be the entry point for all the small wires going into and out of the Hellhole. Now, since I also am in this area, and you can see where I've put orange torque seal on the AN-6 fitting that is now the FT60 red cube fuel flow transducer is now permanently mounted inside the fuselage. But I added this hard point as well as a couple others throughout the Hellhole for cable management, for the Airdog clamps. There's actually one that's not mounted right here, but there's one that goes here for the bigger wires. Now, I do this, there's not a lot of separation, but there's enough here where the big wires, as far as the big power wires, according to Bob Knuckles, and keeping in line with him, keep the big wires separated from the little wires. Okay, and for the last portion of this video, you can see that I've removed the engine mount, and I have the engine mount extrusions up here prepped for the firewall, so I can put the firewall on when I glass it in place. And so that's going to be the next step, is glassing on and floxing on the firewall. I mentioned that I don't have any pulleys on my firewall, which I don't. I just have these Nyloflow tubes that come out via those internal tubes that you saw inside the center section spar, those phenolic tubes. That was planned, so when I glassed it in, I made sure that they were, I didn't just drill a hole willy-nilly. Those were actually reinforced. The air here, there's 2 little minor D-lams there, and then I'm going to have to fill in a little bit. There's not really a D-lam over on this side, but I'm going to treat those holes just to make sure that they are a little bit more secure before I button everything up. But that's pretty much it. So that'll be the next step. I'm not going to put that in the video. That'll be on my blog, www.longezpush.com. But that's pretty much it. So the firewall is ready to go on. I do have to cut the glass, and then of course, as I just explained in this video, the Hellhole is pretty much prepped. Alright, hey, thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Cheers.